interesting. Like your talk is about introverted developers, but I don't think I've ever met one.
I haven't either.
That's crazy. No, Matt has been a great fan of Python Web Conference and a speaker in the past. I'm so excited to have you back. I don't think you need much introduction in the Python community, but I will let you go ahead and take over.
Okay, thanks, Calvin. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm sad I didn't get to see the tap dancing, but we'll get started here. So hopefully you can see my slides here.
Looking good.
Awesome. Okay, and then I don't know if there will be comments in the chat, but if there are, happy to address those, Calvin.
Yeah, if folks want to throw questions from Matt into the Slack channel, I will watch for them and then either bring them in at the end, or if they fit well, I'll interrupt you, but
Awesome.
probably at the end.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, a little bit about me. I like to say that I sell snake oil and teach people to tell lies with data, but I do corporate training and consulting in Python and data science. So that's why I hopped in a little late here, just finishing up a pandas class this morning. So my company MetaSnake does that, and if you're interested in talking about that, happy to talk about getting your team leveled up, that sort of thing. I am in the middle of releasing a new book. So I do have Effective Pandas, which has done really well. People seem to like it. And I'm releasing this week Effective XG Boost. So stay tuned for that if you're in the machine learning realm. So some of the things I like, I live in Utah. And so right now it's an awesome ski season. I've had a great time skiing, and my work actually, if I'm not teaching people at 5 in the morning or at midnight, oftentimes I can go skiing, which I like. Also Utah, Southern Utah is beautiful. So these photos are both photos I've taken. And I like to be outside and do things. Some of the things I don't like is sales or being in large groups and sort of like trying to jump in and say that, voice your opinions. And so, I would consider myself introverted. And I'd say that, my point here is not necessarily that you have to go out and do consulting, but my point here is like a lot of people like computers because they don't like to deal with humans. But the sad truth is that in the real world, we do have to deal with humans. So tools and techniques for, I would say, dealing with humans. But, a lot of people have asked me, like, how do I start consulting? And so we'll sort of apply it to that, but I think these are generally applicable tools. So why you might want to ignore my advice, I'm a white guy, I've got 4 kids, and this is sort of my anecdata, right? But oftentimes people will ask me for advice, and this is my advice, right? I think you should generally take all advice with a grain of salt, and you should also consider where it's coming from. So this is my background. Many would consider me privileged, and I've been very lucky. So I'm grateful for the opportunities I have, but hopefully I can share my experience with you. So consulting, basically the idea, people are going to pay you for your expertise, right? And in an ideal world, people would just find you because you are an expert. But the sad truth is, like, you probably need to grease the skids for people to find you. And so, this doesn't just apply to consulting, it applies to getting a job, getting a better job, that sort of thing. Why might someone consider consulting? Like I said before, like, I like to ski, I like to be outside. I'm a coach on my kids' mountain bike team. These are things that, could I do in a normal 9 to 5? Yeah, I probably could. And then other people do that as well. But it might be a little bit harder for me to do that. And so I do have a little bit more time and flexibility or autonomy. And, consulting can pay pretty well as well. Why might you not consider this? Well, like, especially if you're a one-man shop, I'm generally a one-man shop here. You're kind of running the whole ship, right? So sales, marketing, payroll, and for a lot of what I do, like training, there's this notion of that, is it a race to the bottom? I'm competing with people around the world for training. And now we have tools like AI that people are like, oh, no one's ever going to read a book anymore because AI is going to replace books. So, I mean, yeah, that may be the case, right? I mean, these AI tools are pretty fancy. if you are considering like doing the consulting route, sort of first order, and this is somewhat US centric, but I would say get an accountant, form an LLC, and then list it on LinkedIn, right? And why do I say listed on LinkedIn? I think, you know, we've heard stories about people working 3 jobs and that sort of thing. And I'm not necessarily recommending that you work 3 jobs per se, but you know, presumably if you work a 9 to 5, you know, depending on what your relationship is with your company, they kind of own that 9 to 5. But you know, can you do things in the off time? My take is that you probably should be able to. You might have a contract that doesn't allow you to, but you know, if you sort of put it on LinkedIn, right, or you start doing this, and it's sort of listed there, and then you get another 9 to 5, it's you can sort of say, hey, this is a known quantity, I'm doing this, so just FYI, it's not going to be interrupting my 9 to 5, but I do things on the side, so it's sort of out there, and you don't need to necessarily hide it or worry about it. And some companies might not like that and might say you can't do certain things. Other ones that might be good for them. You know, on the note of like an accountant, you know, is it, you know, in an ideal world, like I would like, oh, it wouldn't be necessary for me to have an accountant, but these people can do like things and save you a bunch of money. And so generally the idea is hire a professional. Another one, especially in the US, is like a health insurance broker. You wouldn't think that this is necessary, but like we have a health insurance broker who can like do things that for whatever reason I can't do to get better health insurance for cheaper. It's sad, but that's sort of the state of ego. So just general advice, like leverage professionals to do things that they are good at, even if you find that frustrating or annoying. So there were a few years ago, this Venn diagram of data science popped up by Drew Conway. And this isn't about data science, so I'm going to sort of riff on this. They said that like a data scientist is someone who's better at stats than most programmers and worse at programming, but better better at programming than most statisticians. But I'm gonna, for you know the purposes of our talk here, talk about 3 things I think are useful if you want to put yourself out there, right? And so attitude, and then investing in yourself and investing in others. So let's talk about attitude first of all. And one of the things that I would say is super important, especially with the end of the world doomsday stuff. I mean, we're having like bank failures now, and like AI taking over the world, and like wars going on. I think your attitude is super important. And so I think you should have an attitude of an abundance mentality. Having said all those things, like generally a lot of people are like, we can't hire enough programmers. We need, if you have a heartbeat and know Python, we want to talk to you, that sort of thing. I think there's more than enough work to go around. And so just in general, have a good attitude and realize like there's a lot of work to go around. And if you've got expertise, people are often willing to pay you for that expertise. So let's talk about attitude from another point of view. There was once this person who had a friend, and the friend was like speaking in all these conferences and traveling around doing these things and getting all this notoriety. And this other person was wondering, why isn't Matt doing this? And Matt, this other person thought, why aren't I doing this? And long story short, it was like, it's because I didn't put myself out there, right? And so you can put yourself out there. Now, having said that, I will say, like, as an introverted person, unless I have like something specific, like just attending a conference is generally kind of a waste of time for me, right? I mean, I can go listen to talks, sort of thing. I'm not super like comfortable like going in and butting into some conversation. So, being a fly on the wall can be useful, but maybe not as useful as other things. However, we flip this around a little bit. The notion of like going up and talking to someone, that is completely flipped on its head if you are the speaker at a conference, right? Then instead of you having to go out and do this work, which a lot of people can find very taxing, the reverse, people are going to come to you, and you're the expert, seen as the expert. And that's a great way to sort of network in a situation where networking might not come naturally to you. So I think speaking at a conference is a huge hack or trick that you can do to get around that introverted nature. And from the attitude, like, I expect to get business from a talk, and I get that, like, a lot of technical people are like, oh, you sell things or whatever. It's like, yeah, I do. I have to feed my family, right? And I mean, hopefully I'm giving value to you, and I'm not directly pitching you, but, you know, I expect that, like, from my participation in a conference, something good will happen to me down the line from that, by my sharing good with others. People ask, like, where do I get work from? And, you know, I get pitched a lot on LinkedIn, but I would say 90%, that might be a little bit lower now, but a good deal of my work is from my network, right? The stuff that's coming in through LinkedIn and social media now is, I would say, a little bit stronger, and I have spent a good deal of time, like, cultivating that social network. But prior to that, you know, most of all that business that came in was from me, people who I knew from work, people who I knew from conference speaking, people that I knew from meetups, that sort of thing. Another thing just on attitude, right? I mean, and again, not everyone has to be a consultant or whatever. It's not the end all be all of the world, but you might have something that you want to do, and you might say, like, I have some mental block that is stopping me from doing that. So write down your goals, right? Don't just think about them, write them down and start reviewing them, right? Revisiting them. And I'm not going to suggest any particular, like, goal methodology, but, you know, there are tools that you can use to make progress, right? And, you know, if you don't write it down, if you don't make progress, it's sort of like this pie in the sky dream. And I'm here to tell you that you can change your life if you want to. Okay, so let's talk about the second thing after you have this thing of attitude, right? Abundance, there's more than enough to go around, and that's investing in yourself. So I'm going to tell a story about this person who wanted to write a course or create a course for Pluralsight. And so this person used Linux on their laptop and created this demo course for Python using Linux. And when I submitted the course, I mean, when this person submitted the course, Pluralsight said, we don't like Linux, or they didn't say it that way, but they said, like, hey, we're a Microsoft shop and everyone uses Microsoft, and it'd be really weird if we had a Python course, like, for all these Microsoft people running on Linux. So I was like, okay, whatever. I mean, I was using Linux for a long time, and, like, seems weird to me because a lot of people I know who use Python use Linux, but whatever. And so I sort of, like, was like, whatever. So long story short, I have heard it through the grapevine that the person who eventually did that course earned on the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars, because that was one of the top courses for Pluralsight. And so my first piece of advice, especially to a lot of folks, is to invest in the right tools. Be willing to spend money on the right tools. Nowadays, I'm in front of corporate people all the time, and I've got a Windows machine over here. I've got a Mac over here. I still use Linux somewhat on, like, WSL, but I use Windows all the time because my clients use Windows, right? And so don't be afraid to, you know, say, you know, I prefer this, but I'm not going to use some other tool because that can close some doors for you. So another story, when I started sort of doing the conference round thing, I was doing a lot of tutorials, giving tutorials, and I wanted to convert my first tutorial, which was just a basic Python tutorial. It's like a half-day tutorial, into a book. And long story short, book writing is a marathon, but I did that and had a book that came out of that. Now, you know, a lot of people will tell you, like, do you write a book for the money? I would say probably not. I know a ton of authors, and some of them make decent money from writing books, but a lot of them you know, would probably make more money hourly consulting. But a book is a really good business card, especially if you want to go down, like, sort of this consulting route, because it basically draws a line and stands, says, I am an expert in this, right? I wrote the book on this. And these days, self-publishing is easy. I mean, there's all this, especially in the book world these days, there's a lot of doom and gloom about AI sort of flooding the market with junk books, or the end of books. The market's already flooded with junk books as is. So, I mean, there might be more junk books as there are, but I think there is a desire for curation, and I think AI brings that need for experts who can curate and create content even more to the front, right? And you might think, well, I can't self-publish a book. It needs to be published by a publisher. I'm here to tell you that, like, if you write a good book and it does decent in the marketplace, it's relatively easy, even if a publisher has rejected your book, to go back to said publisher afterwards and offer them to take your self-published book. All they have to do is look at the Amazon rank, and they can basically determine whether they want to publish your book or not, because that tells them how many sales they'll get, basically. So, and how do I know that? Because it's happened to me multiple times where I've written multiple books now. I've written books with publishers and without, and I would say the majority of my self-published books have been approached to be published by publishers. Another thing you can do to invest in yourself is to be a leader. So let's just sort of compare this to open source, since a lot of folks will sort of understand open source. So I call this the onion skin of open source participation, right? The middle here, the most central figures here, are the people who are the core committers, right? They understand most of the code, and they're pushing code in and out, and they're sort of interacting with others. If you are a committer to a project, and I want to hire someone who's an expert on a project, it's probably the top of my list is going to be someone who's a committer to that project, right? That's going to be a strong indicator that, like, hey, this person knows the project, and leveraging them is going to be a wise investment, right? And so outside of that, you might have someone who's not a committer, but maybe submitting PRs. Outside of that, you might have someone who's submitting bugs. It's interesting to me, like, that the number of times, like in professional environments, like I've helped people debug things, open source code, and I'm like, did you like talk to them on chat, IRC or Slack, or through the mailing list? Did you submit a bug? No, I didn't do this, right? And sometimes I'll walk them through that process, and like within the day they'll have like solutions to this, and they've been banging their heads at it for a long time. So even if, just putting that little bit of effort in there often pays huge dividends. But and then you have people who use a project, like I said, and not really participate in it. And then you have people who have heard of a project, right? So if you think of yourself as like, I'm going to hire someone who's using some open source technology, which person do you want to hire here, right? And as you go down into this onion skin, the more value this person is providing, right? And I'm here to tell you that, like, if you want to invest in yourself, you can go down into that onion skin and be an expert in something, especially if you're interested in consulting on that. So I have another story here. This one isn't about me, but someone who I know quite well wanted to be a Python core committer. And they sat in a cubicle next to me and would talk about that. But I saw their progression. I mean, they were reading the mailing list, they were interacting with people, they started like building in Python, they started like pushing a pull request to Python, and they got core commit rights, right? And they're not necessarily consulting on it these days, but that getting inside of that onion skin has led to them getting excellent jobs because of that, right? That I would dare say, and they would probably agree with me, they wouldn't have gotten otherwise had they not become a core committer. So other ways to become a leader, I mean, you don't have to be a core committer to Python. I'm not a core committer to Python, but other ways you can be a leader, right? Going to meetups, organizing meetups, learning, and then sharing what you're learning, through social media, blogging, presenting. Those are all ways to sort of get your message out there. And there's a lot of tools to help make that really easy these days. So David Robinson, who's a data scientist, had something similar to what I had. He called it the effectiveness of public work. And so this is basically like do things in public, right? But blog, tweet, contribute, open source, give talks, record screencasts, write a book. I think this is in order of his effectiveness. I don't know that I necessarily agree with the order of effectiveness here, but yeah, certainly, like I've seen people who have become leaders solely by tweeting. So if that's your thing, tweeting, certainly you can do that. Blogging, blogging and tweeting might be easier for like the more introverted types. But the notion that you can sort of be an expert, but just sort of hide and never expose yourself to the world is not a really great way for people to find out about you. And other things just in general, invest in yourself, right? And so when I wrote my first book, my fingers started hurting, and I noticed like I can't keep typing this way, or something bad is going to happen, right? So like currently, this is my keyboard, or half of my keyboard here. It's a split keyboard, and I'm not saying that you need to get a split keyboard per se, but I do think that you should listen to your body, and if your body's telling you that like something's off, pay attention to that, right? And be willing to invest in, chair, standing desk, physical therapy. You only have one body. Take care of it. Get enough sleep. These aren't specific to consulting at all, but just like keeping your mental sanity and making sure that your body's functioning correctly. Okay, and then also investing in others. We sort of talked about like self, but how can we invest in others as well? So again, this goes back to that notion of abundance mentality. There's more than enough work. Due to like my work in the Python community and other places, like I know a good deal of Python authors. I also know a good deal of Python trainers, right? To people who are competition with me or doing the same thing as me. It's pretty small world. And I could take the attitude that like, oh, they're my competition. They're out there taking market share from me. But in honesty, I think, at least from my point of view, there's like more than enough work to go around. There's not enough good books out there. There's a lot of people who need training, and there's not enough good trainers out there. So I don't view them as competition. In fact, a lot of them I've done projects and work with, and I kind of view them as partners instead. And so, yeah, I don't think you necessarily want to go out and burn bridges per se, but these people can also be useful in sort of a mastermind capacity to help you understand like where your business might want to go, and you can maybe reciprocate and help them understand, using some of your strengths, how they could improve their business. Another thing that you can do to invest in others is not be always pitching them, right? Rather than like looking for someone to sign a contract, offer services of what can I do to help you, right? And sometimes that might be jumping on a call, a quick brainstorming. I've probably had a few cases of consulting where maybe I spilled the beans, right? And some people would say that that's a bad thing, right, Matt? Where like you went in on discovery call and you basically said, oh, this is what I would do. And they're like, oh, okay, thanks. And then they never called me again, right? But based on my past experience, I'm like, oh, this is the clear solution to that. And they just weren't experts in that and didn't know. But then once I told them, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? And did I lose out on some business? Maybe, but hopefully, I think, like I said, I'm busy as is, and so hopefully, it eventually comes back and they can help others, and maybe if they can help me in the future, that would be awesome. But going up to someone and saying, what can I do to help you, it is also a great way. Just if you are an expert and you want to sort of build some rapport with someone, like at a meetup or a conference or that sort of thing, great way to start building that rapport and building your network. Another thing that's been super useful for me is a mastermind group. And again, this is that notion of finding people who are kind of at the same level of you, or maybe slightly above, or maybe slightly below. But you don't want them like, you know, my case, me having a mastermind group with people who are running 1,000-person companies probably wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? But me having a mastermind group with people who are running other training companies, or other authors, or other people who are trying to leverage social media, those can be really great, right? We can bounce ideas off of one another, learn from one another. Oftentimes we'll sort of understand what's going on in industry, and they might have insight to things to do that I don't have. Also, like I said, there's a ton of work going around, and oftentimes, you know, they'll be able to hand off work or suggest like, hey, you should probably consider looking into this because this is a popular thing or a hot topic. So this is, I found something that's super valuable. And, you know, you can start doing this by interacting with people on social media, right? I've found Twitter and LinkedIn to be super useful. I've heard that Mastodon, other platforms can be useful as well, right? Start contributing on those platforms, and that can lead to some great results there. Viewing clients as others, investing as others, right? I mean, I think you should be fair with your clients, give them fair pricing. I also think that you should also be fair with them, and if they're taking advantage of you, you should be willing to drop a client as well, right? So I think that should go both ways. Teaching, right? Investing in others, teaching is a great way to invest in others or do things in public, and a great way for you to build your network as someone who's known, especially if there's something specific that you want to talk about. You know, a lot of people are concerned with like, am I going to spill the beans? And like, I've most of the content from like my book, like Effective Pandas, you could find it online. I share a lot of content on social media from that, right? You know, is that killing my market for that? I don't think so. I think, you know, people like curated content and they like to have a one place to go. And so especially if they feel like you're giving value, they often want to reciprocate. And so I don't, you know, can you share too much? Maybe you can share too much, right? But I think it's pretty hard to share too much, especially considering like most social media platforms, like there's a limited window when people will see your content, right? So sharing the same content is often a good idea. Investing in others through other means, like being charitable. One of the things I have done in the past is taught at my kids' schools, right? And so my kids in their elementary schools had a program where you could come in and teach for like 6 to 8 weeks. So I've taught like book authoring, I've taught data science to 3rd through 6th graders, I've taught Python programming, I've taught like drone. We learned Python through the turtle module, and then I adapted the turtle module to my drone so they could like change the import statement, and instead of importing turtle, they imported drone has turtle, and then their drawing, instead of drawing on the screen, would fly the turtle drone around, which is kind of cool. Again, I think that, you know, we have been blessed with a lot, and so if we have this abundance mentality, we should be willing to share that. And my feeling is that you will get what these good deeds will come back to you. A great book that's helped me is called The Coder's Path to Wealth and Independence by Bart Beckner. Kind of maybe a woo-woo name, but it is I found it super useful just to sort of think about mindset, and it has a lot of good practices, especially if you're considering going down that consulting route of pricing and interacting with clients and travel and all those sorts of things. So, you know, my stuff has been sort of high level. This digs more into the technical details of that. It's a little old. I mean, it's probably 10 plus years old, but I think it's still useful. Like the content in it is pretty useful still. Okay, so in summary, right? We've talked about three things that, or at least I've talked about three things that I think are important. Your attitude, have a good attitude, invest in yourself, and invest in others. So if you want to connect with me, happy to connect on Twitter, LinkedIn. If you need training, feel free to reach out as well. Happy to discuss those options with you. Thanks everyone so much for letting me be here. It's been a pleasure. Good luck, not just starting a consulting business, but networking and interacting with others. And this conference and other places are a great way to practice that as well. So appreciate Calvin and team for letting me come on.